and we're back. And so today we're going to carry on looking at another example of a land administration project, and one that I was intimately involved in. It was the development of a pilot project in the country of Kazakhstan. And again, this is a little old, this was done back in the 90s, but still a very good lesson. And so I have here the World Bank implementation completion report from this project. Let me just start off my history of working on these projects in the 1990s. Of course, you'll probably remember from history, fairly recent history, that the Soviet system collapsed in 1991 for various reasons, but basically it was for economic reasons why it collapsed. The Soviet system went broke, and they were faced with spending way too much money on defense, and also lacked foreign currency to trade on the world market because of the lowering of the price of oil, which also happened in the late 80s. These were policies put in place by the Reagan administration here in the United States, and basically was to outspend the Soviet system in defense, forcing them to put more resources into defense, and at the same time convincing the countries in the Middle East to flood the world with oil, which lowered the price of oil, which cut off a lot of the foreign exchange resources of the Soviet Union, which their main one was oil. And so they basically sent them broke, and as a result, the Soviet system collapsed. But one of the legacies of the collapse, and one of the things that the Soviets had not spent much money on up until the collapse, because they were diverting all their resources to defense, was housing. And so there was a critical shortage of housing in the Soviet Union, throughout the Soviet Union, after the collapse. And so in order to help the former Soviet republics, and I believe there was 13 republics came out of the former Soviet Union, Kazakhstan was one of them, in order to help them get on their feet and adapt free market economies rather than the planned economies under the Soviet system, the Americans spent a lot of money through USAID, the Agency for International Development, in helping them get up to speed or put in place projects that would help them get on their feet and get started with free market economies, based on supply and demand and trade, etc. And so one of the things that they wanted to do was to promote private investment in real estate to fill the gap of the shortage in housing. And so they try to get developers in there to put in subdivisions, build homes, build apartment blocks, and manage the apartments that are already there in a more user-pay fashion. Because up until the Soviet system collapsed, all real estate in the whole of the Soviet Union countries was owned by the government. And they quickly realized, moving rapidly to a free market economy, that they learned quickly that real estate is a big store of wealth, and they needed to create markets in real estate for real estate to be bought and sold. And so they immediately pretty much gave a certificate of ownership to whoever occupied real estate at the end of the Soviet era. So if you lived in an apartment, you got title to it. But what they didn't do at that time was set up a mechanism to transfer title. So there was no mechanism to find out, just to store or record who was the owner of all the real estate, and put in place like a title registration system. And so they soon realized that you had and we soon realised that no one was going to invest in housing unless you could have secure ownership of the real estate. And so they looked around for experts that had an idea of how to establish land administration systems, including agencies that could set up and record who owns what and make it available to transfer ownership from one owner to a seller to a buyer, like we've been discussing with the title registration system. And so I first went to Kazakhstan in 1993, the summer of 1993, and was there for about 6 weeks, discussing with various ministries under the government of Kazakhstan on the best way and who should be able to set up a real estate registration system. And so it was pretty much an education process to educate the people in charge of the government that are interested in land or housing or construction, the need for a real estate registration system, and had to convince them that who would be the people. They had to convince themselves who would be the best agents who would put this in place. And of course, when we showed them the experience in Thailand and other countries of putting these things in place and the income that was generated, then everybody I went to visit thought this would be a good idea, we'll do it. And so there was they set up a land committee that looked at the privatization of land and this land itself. They also had Ministry for Construction, which was in charge of new construction, including housing, under the Soviet system, but they didn't have the cash to build things anymore. And but they were still in charge of all the existing buildings that were in place. And so one of the things that was a bit of a break on all this was the fact that they had a different way of ownership for the building and separate ownership for the land. It was not included altogether, which is the basic definition of land is anything that's on the land under most jurisdictions. Like here in the United States, if you own land, you also own on the land, unless it's like a condo development. And so they're set up separately so you can have three-dimensional subdivision. And so that was an impediment to the way we look at title registration and the ownership of land. They distinguish between the buildings with separate ownership to the land, which is still an ongoing problem. And they're working away around that. So we also had the Ministry of Architecture that designed all this stuff, all these buildings, and also the Ministry of Justice was not particularly concerned about title registration until we got there and started talking to them and then realizing that if this is going to work, it had to be based on sound legislation. Okay, written also into the Constitution, which was the fact under the Republic of Kazakhstan, which they formed a constitution as soon as the Soviet system collapsed, was written into the Constitution that the government owns all the land. Okay, and so we had to get around that statement. So what the Department of Justice did, under our guidance, interpreted that as saying, well, the government wanted people to privately own real estate. And so we interpreted that statement in the Constitution that they have sovereignty over the land and under that they allow private ownership. And so there were presidential decrees declaring that ownership could be on a private basis. So we got around that, but for the first few years, 93 to 96, I went back pretty much every summer and continued this discussion, and half the time I was funded by USAID, and the other half the time I was funded by the World Bank. But the very first time I was there in 1993, the World Bank at the same time was setting up an office in Kazakhstan because they did not have a country representative, and they were just getting that set up. So I went to visit the guy from the World Bank and explained to him, and actually luckily he'd already read about a big project in the Soviet Union, in Russia, the Federation of Russia, and they were looking at land administration project. And then I made this guy aware of projects, of the Thailand project, and the theory behind it, and the fact that it's already been proven by them to be very successful. And so he bought into this because he was looking for projects that the World Bank could fund. And of course, this one floated to the top, so it became a pretty important project that they were looking at to fund. They wanted to get established in Kazakhstan and all the three prior Soviet republics to help them develop free market and international trade relations and the whole gamut. And so he became interested. So the process of educating the Kazakhstan government and all its ministries took several years to convince them that they needed to do this and that the bank was willing to fund it. And so in 1996, in the summer of 1996, we had this big conference in Kazakhstan, in Almaty, which was the capital back then. It's since moved to another place called Astana, which was an old city called Akmala, which is further to the northern part of the country. The old capital was Almaty, which was down near the southern side, right next to the Alpine region. And so that's where everything was back then, but it's since moved to this new city, new capital city. So I had this convention or this conference where all the ministries that showed an interest in this came, and this was another educational conference where various speakers, including myself, got up and explained what land registration was, how it works in other countries. We'd flown a lot of them to the United States so they could see what a vibrant real estate market looked like. And they got a big education about that. And what we also showed them the land record offices in the United States and how cumbersome they were. And we also took them to other places where they had title registration systems so they could see the difference. Because this is going to be their system and they'll decide what they want. And so they settled on a registration system. But this conference in the summer of 1996 was for them to say, yeah, we need to do this, but who's going to do it? Who has the expertise to put all this in place? And it was like a 3-day conference. And at the end of the third day, there was this big debate in Russian, which was translated or interpreted for us into English. So we heard this big argument going back and forth, which agency wants to put their hand up and do this, and they all wanted to do it, of course. And then there was a Deputy Minister for Justice who got up towards the end of the day and said, you know, I know you all want to do this, and it's very practical, and we need to do this, but it's not going to happen unless there's a good legal infrastructure for it to sit on. If we don't get the law right, it's just not going to work. And so the logical place to start is in the Ministry of Justice. And everyone said, yeah, okay. So that's where it started out. And so they applied for this $10 million loan, and it was called a pilot project because $10 million is, you can't do a lot. And they wanted it to be a decentralized system. And so with this loan, they started working on a couple of places where they wanted to implement this pilot project. And so I got involved in the beginning of 1997. I spent 3 months there from about February, March, April, beginning May, working in the Ministry of Justice, helping them get the legislation on. And at the same time, there was a World Bank sponsored conference in Bangkok, in Thailand, focusing on how great the Thailand Land project was. And so we flew 3 Kazakhs, the Deputy Minister for Justice, a lawyer, and someone who worked in the land committee, a surveyor and mapping person, and myself and a Bulgarian lady who spoke English and Russian, and we all flew down to this conference in Bangkok and spent about 4 days there, and showing them, and so that they could hear from the Thais and also from other countries that were involved in developing these systems. And so they got an impression, not just from what we were saying, but by seeing the actual project on the ground and in Thailand, that it was very successful. And of course, all the financial aspects of it was displayed, and we saw adjudication going on in the field, we saw the mapping component. So they saw everything. So it was really a good exercise in helping them come to realize what the whole system should be set up to do. So this document is from 2001. So it reports on the loan that was finished in, I don't know, 99 or something, 97. So it's very similar to the document we looked at on Tuesday regarding the Thailand project. These are all the agencies that were involved in their acronyms. The contents. We'll try to look at the executive summary. The World Bank team leader was a guy by the name of Ed Cook. Got to know him pretty well. Not sure. I don't think. No, he did not come to the project in Thailand, the conference in Thailand. But he endorsed the fact that we went to see that because it came out of the budget for this thing. And it was a really good exercise. So the project was appraised in '96. This was pretty much at the same time our conference was on, and approved in early '97, and that's when I started working on the project. And so it closed in '99. And so this is the report on the outcome of the pilot project. So outcome was satisfactory. These are these meanings of these letters. Outcome was satisfactory. Sustainability is likely. Institutional development was substantial. And this is, a lot of it was the institutional development, setting up the infrastructure within the Department of Justice and making this thing work. So that was substantial. And the bank performance was satisfactory, and the borrower performance was